Mom, you won't be joining us. Melissa prefers to keep it just family. You've already done your part by paying. That was the text my son sent me the night before the trip. I was sitting in my Texas home, suitcase half packed, gifts for my grandchildren already waiting. For 3 years, I saved every dollar to make this vacation happen, and with one short message, I was told I wasn't part of it. But what they didn't think about was this. Every booking, every ticket, every payment was under my name. They thought I would stay silent. They were wrong. So let me tell you what happened next. Would you have done the same if you were me? My name is Helen Carter. I'm 65 years old, and I live alone in a small house in Texas. That night, I was sitting at my kitchen table with the lamp on, the same lamp I've had for years, the one that throws a yellow glow on the old cracked wall. The house was quiet, too quiet. In front of me were 3 little gift bags. I had worked on them all day. For Emily, my granddaughter, I had sewn a handkerchief with her initials on it. For Lucas, her brother, I had put in a small toy saxophone keychain. And for both of them, I had printed out tickets for the New Orleans Jazz Festival. I thought they would smile when I handed them over. I thought this trip would be something they would remember forever. Next to the bags was my suitcase, half packed. 2 dresses I hadn't worn in years, a pair of shoes that still had dust on them from the closet, and a small bottle of lavender oil because I always carry it when I travel. It makes me feel calm. I had imagined putting a drop on their pillows at night, the way I used to when they were little and came to stay at my house. The only sound in the room came from my old upright piano in the corner. A few keys don't work anymore, but sometimes I still touch it, out of habit. I pressed one key and the sound came out flat, like even the piano was tired. I smiled a little because Frank, my husband, God rest his soul, used to tease me about keeping that old thing. He would say, "Helen, that piano's seen better days." And I'd always answer, "So have I, but you're still here with me." He's been gone 7 years now. The piano stayed. I was about to stand up and make some tea when my phone buzzed on the table. It was late, almost 11 at night. At that age, you don't expect good news that late. I picked it up anyway, and what I read made my stomach drop. "Mom, you won't be joining us. Melissa prefers to keep it just family. You've already done your part by paying." That was it. No hello, no explanation, no thank you. Just that. I read it once, then again. I thought maybe I was seeing things wrong. I put on my glasses and read it a 3rd time. Same words. Cold. Final. For 3 years, I had saved every extra dollar for this trip. I had sold old furniture. I had given up cable. I had even taken on tutoring lessons online, squinting at the computer screen late into the night, all so I could make this trip happen. I wanted to give my son and his family something special, something that would bring us all closer again. And with one message, just like that, I was cut out. I sat there staring at the phone. My first thought was to reply, to ask why, to say how much this hurt. But my hands wouldn't type. What was I supposed to say? Please let me come? Please don't leave me out? I couldn't do that. Not after everything I had given. So I put the phone face down on the table and looked around the room. The house felt smaller than ever. The gifts on the table looked foolish now. The suitcase by the door looked like a joke. And I sat there, 65 years old, with tears in my eyes, asking myself the question no mother should ever have to ask. When did I become the extra? The one who doesn't belong anymore? I pressed my palms against the wooden table, trying to steady myself. My hands shook, not from age, but from something deeper. Shame, anger, sadness, all mixed together. I had dreamed of this trip as a way to remember my husband, to bring the family together, to light a candle for him by the Mississippi River. I had planned every little detail, and now I was told I wasn't part of it. I thought about Emily and Lucas. Would they even ask about me when they went? Would Melissa just tell them Grandma stayed home? Would they even know how much I had done for this? The clock ticked loudly in the kitchen. I stared at the crack in the wall that Frank never got around to fixing. For years, I had covered that crack with a picture frame, but tonight I noticed it again. It felt like a sign, a reminder that no matter how much you cover things up, the truth is still there. The truth was this. I wasn't just being left behind. I was being erased from my own family. And that night, sitting alone in my Texas home, I realized something even harder to face. If they could erase me so easily, then maybe Maybe I had to start asking myself why I was still letting them. Frank, my husband, used to talk about New Orleans like it was magic. He'd say, "One day, Helen, I'll take you and the kids there. We'll listen to jazz in the streets, eat food so good we'll never forget it." He never got the chance. He passed away before we could, but I carried that promise in my heart. I wanted to finish what he started. After he died, I told myself I would make that trip happen. Not just for me, but for the whole family. I wanted David and Melissa and the grandkids to feel the city the way Frank once described it. I wanted us all to stand together by the Mississippi and light a candle for him, so I started saving. It wasn't easy. I live on a small pension, just enough to cover bills and groceries. But I found ways. I sold old furniture that had been collecting dust in the garage. I gave away the dining set we barely used. I even let go of Frank's old tool chest. It hurt, but I told myself it was for something bigger. I also went back to teaching piano, not in a school, but at home. I opened my living room to neighborhood kids. My fingers hurt sometimes, the arthritis making it hard to press the keys, but I kept going. I showed them simple songs, scales, little melodies. Their parents gave me a few dollars each time. Some weeks it wasn't much, but I tucked every bill into an envelope marked New Orleans. I cut corners, too. I canceled cable. I stopped buying the brand of tea I liked and settled for the cheapest box. I lowered the heat in the winter and wore extra sweaters instead. When friends asked me out for lunch, I told them I wasn't feeling well. The truth was, I didn't want to spend the money. Every dollar went toward that dream. 3 years I lived like that. 3 years of sacrifices. 3 years of saying no to myself so I could say yes to the family. I believed the trip would bring us together again, that it would remind David of his father, remind him of where he came from, but the cracks had already started showing. I remember Thanksgiving last year. Melissa was taking pictures after dinner. She said, "Let's get one of the family." I stood up, ready to join. I even held Emily's hand. But then Melissa said, "Well, let's do just our family unit first." So I stepped back. They posed without me. David didn't say a word. And then, just like that, the pictures were over. There was no, "Come on, let's add Grandma." Nothing. When the photos were printed, I saw the truth. There was a perfect picture of them, Melissa, David, the kids, all smiling in their matching sweaters. And me? I wasn't in it. In fact, one shot caught me on the edge, half of my body visible, cut off like I wasn't part of the frame. I told myself it didn't matter. That photos are just photos. But it did matter. It hurt more than I admitted at the time. It wasn't just that one night. There were other times. Times when I told a story about Frank and Melissa rolled her eyes like she was tired of hearing his name. Times when holidays suddenly moved to her mother's house and I only found out the day before. Times when David stayed silent instead of standing up for me. Each moment on its own might not seem like much, but together they added up. Slowly, quietly, I was being pushed further and further out. And still, I held on to the idea of that trip. I told myself that once we were in New Orleans, once we lit that candle by the river, everything would feel different. They would remember. They would see me again. But sitting there with that photo in my hand, half of me cut out of the frame, I had to admit something I'd been avoiding. I wasn't just forgotten. I was being erased. I held the picture close, staring at the part of me that didn't make it into the shot. And I whispered, almost like I was talking to Frank, "When did I become someone standing outside my own family?" The next afternoon, there was a knock on my front door. It startled me a little. I don't get many visitors these days. When I opened it, there stood George, my neighbor from across the street. He's 70, a retired veteran, always wearing the same faded cap with the army patch on it. He comes by once in a while to help me fix small things around the house, things Frank would have done if he were still here. "Afternoon, Helen," he said, holding up a small toolbox. "I found that wrench I borrowed from you last month. Thought I'd return it before I forgot again." I invited him in, mostly because I didn't want to sit alone with my thoughts any longer. He followed me into the kitchen, set the toolbox on the counter, and looked around. George has that way of noticing things without making a big deal of it. His eyes landed on the little gift bags I had prepared, still sitting on the table. Then he glanced at my phone, which buzzed just as he looked over. Another message from David lit up the screen. I didn't mean for George to read it, but he caught a glimpse before I turned the phone face down. He frowned. "Everything all right?" I hesitated. For a moment I thought about brushing it off. saying I was fine. That's what I usually do. But something about George, maybe the years in his face, the weight in his voice, made me answer differently this time. My son, I said quietly. He told me I'm not going with them. Said I've already done my part. By paying. George leaned back in his chair, his expression hardening. Wait a second. Didn't you say you booked that whole trip yourself? I nodded slowly. I did. Every ticket, the hotel, the festival passes, the train, all of it came from my account. He shook his head, muttering under his breath. Helen, listen to me. If your name is on those bookings, then you're the one who controls them. Not him. Not her. You. The words hit me harder than I expected. I hadn't thought of it like that. To me, it had always been about giving, about making sure everyone else was comfortable. I never once considered that all of those receipts, all of those confirmations, all of that planning, it all carried my name. I must have looked uncertain because George leaned forward. His voice was steady, the kind of steady that comes from someone who's seen too much to waste words. They can push you aside, Helen. They can say you don't belong. But don't forget this. Without you, there is no trip. I sat there in silence, letting his words sink in. My eyes went to the laptop sitting on the side table in the living room. I hadn't opened it since the night of the message. Slowly, I stood up, almost afraid of what I might see. The screen flickered to life, asking for my password. My hands trembled a little as I typed it in. Then, with George watching quietly from across the room, I opened the folder marked New Orleans Trip. Reservation appeared on the screen. Hotel, train tickets, festival passes, all under one name, Helen Carter. For the first time in days, something inside me stirred. Not joy, not even anger. Something else. A spark of realization. A small, steady flame that whispered, "You still have a say in this story." I stared at the bold letters on the screen, my own name stamped across every booking. And in that moment, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. The next morning, I tried one more time. Maybe I was foolish, maybe I just didn't want to believe it was really happening. I picked up my phone and typed a simple message to David. I can pack some snacks for Emily and Lucas. They always get restless on long trips. I still have those motion sickness bands I used for you when you were little. Should I bring them? I pressed send. Then I sat there watching the little screen, waiting for those 3 dots to appear, the ones that mean someone is typing back. They never came. After a few minutes, I saw the word seen pop up under my message. My son had read it, and then nothing. No reply, no, thanks, Mom. No, we've got it covered. Not even a single word. I put the phone down on the table, my chest tight. I told myself maybe he was busy, maybe he'd call later. But deep down, I knew. About an hour later, the phone rang. For a split second, I hoped it was David. Maybe he had changed his mind. Maybe he wanted to talk. But the screen lit up with Melissa's name instead. I answered anyway. Hello? Her voice came through sharp, the kind of sharp that cuts even when wrapped in a smile. Hi, Helen. I just wanted to say, we've got everything handled for the trip. You really don't need to worry about snacks or bags or anything. I tried to keep my voice steady. I just thought, maybe the kids would like... She cut me off before I could finish. Really, Helen, we've got it all under control. You should use this time to rest. You've done enough already. There was a pause. Her words sounded polite on the surface, but the message underneath was clear. Stay out of it. You're not part of this. I swallowed hard. All right, I whispered. Melissa's tone brightened, fake cheerful now. Great, I knew you'd understand. We'll call when we get back. And just like that, the call ended. I sat in my kitchen, staring at the phone still warm in my hand. My eyes drifted to the travel envelope sitting on the counter. Inside were the tickets printed with all of our names, including mine. I pulled mine out. It said in bold letters, Helen Carter. I held that piece of paper so tightly the edges bent under my fingers. It was proof. Proof that I had been part of this trip. Proof that I wasn't imagining things. Proof that at least on paper I still belonged. But paper is easy to ignore. People are easier to erase. I pressed the ticket flat against the table, my hands shaking, and thought to myself, how did I go from planning everything to begging just to bring snacks? Later that afternoon, I sat down at my old laptop to check my email. I wasn't expecting anything important, maybe a receipt, maybe a reminder from the bank. But there it was, sitting right at the top of my inbox. Subject, final confirmation, Carter family trip. My heart jumped for a second. I clicked it open almost out of habit. The email was from the tour company. It listed every detail of the trip I had planned: hotel check-in, train schedules, festival passes. I scrolled through line by line and then I froze. Passenger list, 6 names. David, Melissa, Emily, Lucas, and Melissa's parents. That was it. My name wasn't there. I scrolled back up, thinking maybe I'd missed it. I zoomed in, double-checked, even clicked the attachment twice. But no. 6 tickets, 6 names, not 7. Not mine. I stared at the screen until the letters blurred. A cold feeling settled in my chest, heavy and sharp at the same time. I had done all the work, paid every bill, planned every detail, and still I was gone. I wanted to believe it was a mistake. Maybe the travel agent had left me off by accident. Maybe there was another email with my ticket attached. I looked through every folder, inbox, spam, deleted, nothing. Then, as if the universe wanted to make sure I understood, my phone buzzed. It was a new post on social media. Melissa had uploaded a photo of the kids standing by their luggage, smiling wide. She captioned it, "Family only off to New Orleans." 2 words in that caption cut me open. Family only. I read it over and over. Family only. And where did that leave me? I had always believed family was forever, that no matter the fights, no matter the distance, you never stopped being part of it. But in that moment, staring at Melissa's picture, I realized she didn't see me as family at all. And worse, David went along with it. I covered my mouth with my hand, but the sobs came anyway. My shoulders shook and I let the tears fall right onto the keyboard. For years, I had tried to be the good mother, the helpful grandmother, the one who stayed quiet and gave without asking for anything back. And now, I was repaid with silence, with exclusion, with being written out of my own family's story. I looked around the kitchen. The gift bags I had packed looked ridiculous now. The suitcase by the door looked like a bad joke. Even the lamp above me seemed too bright, exposing the truth I had been trying not to see. I whispered out loud, to no one in particular, maybe just to the walls, "Family only. And what about me?" The question hung in the air, unanswered. That night, after Melissa's post and after the tears, I pulled out the drawer in my desk. Inside was a neat stack of folders I had been building for 3 years. Each folder marked with careful handwriting: hotel, train, festival, food tours, extras. I laid them out across the table one by one, like cards in a game I was losing. The first was the hotel reservation, a boutique place near the French Quarter. I remembered calling the manager 3 times just to make sure the beds were firm enough for Melissa's parents, and that the rooms on the first floor were wheelchair accessible. The reservation form stared back at me now. At the top, in bold black letters, booking owner, Helen Carter. The second was the train tickets. 6 seats, all reserved through my account. I had chosen the earlier morning departure so the kids wouldn't get too restless. And again, at the bottom of the page, purchased by Helen Carter. Then came the jazz festival passes. I had gone through the trouble of securing VIP access because I wanted the kids to see the parade from the front, not stuck in the back where they couldn't hear the music. I had imagined Emily sitting on my lap, Lucas tugging on my sleeve when the brass band marched by, and there it was again, paid in full by Helen Carter. Every page, every document, every little detail had my name. Not David's, not Melissa's, mine. I sat back in the chair and pressed my palms against my eyes. My heart was beating fast, too fast for someone my age. Inside my head, a voice whispered, "You could stop this. You could shut it all down. With one call, one click, you could end it." But another voice followed right after. "Wouldn't that be too cruel? Wouldn't that make me the villain? What about the kids? They didn't do anything wrong." I shook my head, torn between anger and guilt. That's the thing about being a mother. You never stop thinking about the children, even when they've grown up and hurt you. I stared at the train tickets again. Their names were printed neatly under mine, like they were all passengers on a journey I had created. Except now, I was no longer welcome. I spoke out loud, even though no one was there to hear it. "Do I have the right to stop this? Would it be too much? Too heartless? I pushed the papers aside and glanced toward the piano in the corner. For some reason, I walked over and pressed one of the working keys. A single note rang out, clear but lonely, and in that sound I heard Frank's voice. It wasn't real, of course, but it felt real. His words came back to me, words he used to say when I was younger, when I doubted myself. Music is freedom, Helen. Don't let anyone silence you. Not ever. I sat back down, his voice still echoing in my head. For years, I had been silent. I had swallowed every small insult, every eye roll, every time Melissa pushed me aside. I told myself it didn't matter, that love would make up for it. But love, without respect, isn't love. It's control. I looked at the laptop on the table. The screen was still on from earlier, glowing faintly in the dark room. My fingers hovered over the trackpad. I navigated back to the tour company's website. There, in the corner of the screen, was a button I had never really noticed before. Modify booking. My hand trembled as I moved the cursor closer. The page opened up to a list of all my reservations. Hotel, train, festival. Each one with the option, change guest information. I clicked on the hotel booking. A small window popped up. Would you like to update the guest names? I didn't type anything. Not yet. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, stiff with hesitation. Inside, the same war raged on. If you change this, there's no going back. But if you don't, they'll walk all over you again and again. What about Emily and Lucas? They'll be disappointed. But what about me? Am I supposed to keep disappearing until there's nothing left of me? I leaned back in the chair, the weight of years pressing on my chest. The memory of Thanksgiving, the photo without me, Melissa's voice on the phone telling me to rest. All of it collided in my mind. I closed my eyes and pictured Frank standing on that old porch, his hand warm in mine, telling me about New Orleans. He had believed in me, in us, in family. But family is supposed to go both ways. You give, but you also belong. And if they won't let me belong, then maybe it's time I stop giving. I opened my eyes. The laptop screen glowed, waiting. My hand reached out, the cursor hovering over the button that would let me rewrite everything. My breath caught in my throat. I whispered, almost like a prayer, "Am I strong enough to do this?" And then, with my heart pounding louder than the piano had ever played, I moved the cursor closer. My finger hovered above the mouse pad, stopping just short of the click. The words on the screen were simple, but they carried the weight of everything I had endured. Change guest information. I froze there, my whole body trembling, because I knew what this meant. Once I did this, there would be no turning back. And in that quiet, heavy moment, my finger stopped right above the button. That night, I cleared the kitchen table and brought out the folders I kept for 3 years. I don't keep many things neat, but these I did. Each one had a label I wrote with a thick black marker. Hotel, train, festival, tours, food, extras. I laid them out in a row like stepping stones, the path I had built so my family could walk together. I opened hotel first. The confirmation printout felt heavier than paper. I remembered the calls I'd made, asking about first-floor rooms for Melissa's parents, asking if the doors were wide enough for a walker, asking whether the courtyard got too loud after 9 p.m. The manager had called me by name. "Mrs. Carter, don't worry, we'll make it comfortable." At the top of the page it still said, in bold, "Booking owner, Helen Carter." Check-in required the card on file. My card. I opened train. I had chosen morning seats so the kids wouldn't melt down by evening. Seat numbers lined up across the page. I could see exactly where we'd have sat. Again, the receipt read, "Purchased by Helen Carter." The last 4 digits of the card were mine. The account email was mine. Every update notification went to me. Festival came next. I'd paid extra so the grandkids could see the brass bands up close. The passes were scannable codes linked to my email. If anyone lost a bracelet, the desk would only reissue it to the booking owner. That was printed right there in small type. I underlined it with a pen without thinking. Then, tours and food. A short walking tour on the second day, slow pace, plenty of shade. A beignet stop because Emily once said she wanted to try the sugar donuts New Orleans people make. Dinner reservations for a small place that still takes phone calls because older folks prefer that. Each item ended the same way. Payment owner, Helen Carter. I sat back in the chair and let out a sound that wasn't quite a laugh. I had erased myself from so many places to make this happen. Cable canceled, favorite tea switched for the cheapest box, Thermostat kept low in winter so the bill would stay down. And here I was, erased by my own son with one text. It made me angry, but something else was louder, a feeling that I had been foolish. Not for giving, but for assuming giving meant I would be welcome. A thought came that I didn't want. You could stop this. I pushed it away. Then it came back clearer. You could change it. Not out of spite, out of self-respect. I argued with myself out loud in that quiet kitchen. Would that be too cruel? What about the kids? I pictured their faces, not their parents. I pictured the way Emily asked questions without fear, and the way Lucas laughs with his whole body. None of this was their fault. That was the hardest part. I stood up, restless, and walked to the piano. 2 keys don't sound right anymore, but the middle ones still do. I pressed down and let one clean note ring out. It reminded me of Frank. He had a way of settling me down, without saying much. But I could hear him anyway. Music is freedom, Helen. Don't let anyone silence you. He used to say that when I hesitated to take a solo at church. He'd nudge me forward. I hated the spotlight, but I always played better when I stopped worrying about who liked me. I went back to the table and opened the laptop. The travel website still had me logged in. On the trip page, there were a few small buttons I had never paid attention to. Modify booking, change guest information, cancel and refund policy. I clicked cancel and refund policy first, not because I wanted to cancel, but because I needed to know the rules. The policy said changes to guest names were allowed by the booking owner up to 48 hours before check-in. ID would be required at check-in to match the updated names. Card on file had to be present. Owner verification could be requested by email, code, or phone call. All of that pointed one way. The person in control was me. I stared at the screen and then at the stack of papers. I had always told myself that being generous made me strong. But generosity without boundaries doesn't feel like kindness. It starts to feel like being used. I didn't want revenge. I wanted a line, one I could stand behind and say, "This is where I stopped disappearing." I opened my email and found the original hotel thread. The manager had written, "Mrs. Carter, if you need to make any changes, just reply to this address and we'll handle it immediately." My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I typed a message, then deleted it. I typed again, "Hello, this is Helen Carter, the booking owner. I need to update guest names." I didn't hit send, not yet. I tried something else. I picked up my phone and drafted a text to David. I saw the final confirmations. My name isn't on them. That hurt. I want to talk. I stared at it for a long time. Then I remembered yesterday's scene. No answer. I deleted the draft. I wasn't going to beg to be heard in a conversation I had paid for. I dialed the hotel instead. The manager answered on the second ring. I gave my confirmation number and asked a plain question. "If the booking owner updates the guest list, what happens at check-in?" She said, matter of fact, "We'll ask for the owner's ID and the card on file. The new guests must match the names we have on the reservation. It's a simple process." She paused and added gently, "Do you need us to remove someone?" I said, "I'm considering my options." She replied, "Whatever you decide, we'll follow your instructions, Mrs. Carter." We ended the call politely. No drama, just facts. That steadiness helped. I needed facts to quiet the noise in my head. I took out a notepad and made 2 columns. On the left, I wrote, "If I do nothing." On the right, "If I make changes." Under, "If I do nothing." They go to New Orleans without me, paid for by me. The pattern continues. I give, they decide, I disappear. I carry this hurt into the next holiday, and the next one after that. Under, "If I make changes, I act as the owner I actually am. They have to face the choice they made, not hide it behind my money. I can still choose kindness, just not at my expense." I stared at those lists. The first column felt familiar, like a worn-out path my feet knew too well. The second was rougher, scarier. But it was honest. Another thought rose up. This is not about punishing children. This is about correcting adults. I wrote that at the bottom of the page and drew a box around it. I went back to the website and clicked Change Guest Information. A form opened. Current names on the reservation with little edit icons next to each. There was also a line that said add or remove guests with a note. Subject to room and ticket limits. Changes require owner verification. At the top right was a blue button I hadn't noticed before. Save changes. It was grayed out until I typed something. I didn't type yet. I looked at the clock. It was late, later than people my age should be making big decisions. I closed my eyes and pictured the photo from Thanksgiving, the one where I was cut off at the edge. I pictured Melissa's caption, "Family only." I pictured my own name in bold on every receipt. Those images sat side by side like two truths that didn't match. One of them had to give. I thought about all the small times I let it go, times I told myself it wasn't worth the fight, times I said, "It's fine," when it wasn't. I thought about the way I trained myself to be grateful for crumbs because at least crumbs meant I was nearby. I thought about the sound of Frank's voice on that porch, telling me I didn't have to play small. I opened my eyes. My hands were steadier. Before I touched the form, I did one last check. I clicked into account and confirmed my phone number and email were current. I confirmed the two-step code would come to me. I confirmed the last 4 digits of the card again. Then I opened the festival portal and checked the reissue policy one more time. Owner only. Photo ID required. If anything went wrong, they'd email me. I took a breath and spoke out loud, the way I do when I need courage. This isn't revenge. This is me taking my name back. My cursor returned to the form. The little edit icons waited. I didn't change a single letter yet, but the choice was clear in front of me. I moved the mouse to the top right corner where the button sat, still gray, still silent, still asking me if I meant it. My finger hovered above the trackpad. I could hear the refrigerator hum, the distant tick of the clock, and the old house settling. No music, no speeches, no dramatic words. Just a mother, a screen, and a line she was about to draw. I whispered to Frank or to myself, I'm not sure which. I have the right to stop this. Then I slid the cursor to the only place it needed to be and paused, my fingertips steady for once, in a long time, right above the button that said, Change Information Page. The next morning, I woke up with the same knot in my stomach I'd gone to bed with. The folders were still on the table, the laptop screen dark but waiting. I poured myself a cup of coffee, sat down, and opened the computer again. The button was still there. Change guest information. This time, I didn't just stare at it. I clicked. The form opened. 6 names filled the list: David, Melissa, the kids, and Melissa's parents. All lined up neatly under my booking. At the bottom, a blank field read, Add or replace guest names. My hands shook, but not from fear this time. From something else, something that felt almost like courage. I didn't know yet who I would replace them with. All I knew was that I couldn't leave those lines blank. If family didn't want me, maybe it was time to find people who did. I thought about the women at church, the ones who sat beside me every Wednesday night in the choir room. We called ourselves the Harmony Sisters, though none of us were professionals. We sang because it made us feel alive, because music filled the empty spaces in our homes. I reached for my phone and dialed Carol first. She answered with her usual laugh, the kind that hides a tiredness she never admits. Carol, I said softly, do you remember how Frank always talked about New Orleans? I've got an extra room on a trip I planned. Would you like to go? There was silence on the line. Then a small, trembling laugh. Helen, I haven't left the state in 30 years. My son stopped calling after my cancer. I thought my traveling days were over. I swallowed hard. They're not over, Carol, not if you still want them. Next, I called Nora. Her voice was shaky when she picked up. Helen, is something wrong? No, I said, something's right. I'm going to New Orleans and I don't want to go alone. Will you come? She gasped. Me? Helen, I thought I was too old to dream like that. Nobody asked me to go anywhere anymore. You're not too old, I said firmly. You deserve more than being forgotten. I went down the list. Beverly, who still wore her wedding ring even though her husband left her years ago. Louise, who hadn't taken a vacation since she buried her husband last fall. Each woman hesitated, not because they didn't want to go, but because they couldn't believe someone had thought of them. One by one, I told them the same thing. You are worth this. You are not invisible. Come with me. Tears came to my eyes, not from sadness this time, but from hearing the disbelief turn into joy on the other end of the line. Carol whispered, I never thought anyone would invite me again. Nora said, Helen, you've just given me back a piece of myself. When the last call ended, I sat there in silence, my heart beating in a rhythm I hadn't felt in years. I turned back to the laptop, to the form waiting. Carefully, I typed the names in, letter by letter. Helen Carter and the Harmony Sisters. The blue button lit up. Save changes. I clicked. A confirmation box appeared. Booking updated successfully. Owner, Helen Carter. Guest list, Helen Carter and the Harmony Sisters. I leaned back in my chair and let out a long breath I didn't realize I had been holding. For the first time since that awful text, I felt a spark of something I thought I'd lost. Control. Not revenge, not anger, just clarity. I whispered to myself, we deserve this more than being left behind. And as the morning light came through the window, I felt it for the first time in years, hope shining back at me. The morning of the trip arrived. I didn't go near the main entrance of the station. Instead, I walked quietly with my friends, the Harmony Sisters, toward the side platform. My ticket scanned without a problem. The woman at the gate smiled and said, "Welcome aboard, Mrs. Carter." I nodded, clutching my bag a little tighter. The station was crowded, louder than I remembered from years ago. Children tugged at their parents, vendors shouted about snacks. The loudspeaker announced departures in a metallic voice that echoed through the hall. I glanced across the concourse and saw them, David, Melissa, the kids, and Melissa's parents, walking together in their matching shirts. Across each chest in bold letters it said, "Family Trip 2025. They looked so proud, so certain, dragging their rolling suitcases like everything was perfectly under control. Melissa posed them in front of the big departure board, snapping a picture on her phone. David threw up a peace sign. Emily smiled politely, but I could see her eyes darting around, restless. I turned away before anyone saw me. My heart was pounding, not because I was afraid, but because I knew what was about to happen. Inside the main line, they queued up at the check-in desk. From where I sat, I could see bits and pieces. Melissa handed over the printouts, smiling that smile she uses when she wants people to think everything is perfect. The clerk typed something into the computer, then frowned. The clerk said something. Melissa's smile faltered. She leaned in, speaking faster. The clerk shook her head. David stepped forward, trying to take control. He pulled out his wallet and waved the papers around. The clerk looked again, then turned the monitor toward him. Even from where I sat, I could read her lips as she spoke firmly. "I'm sorry. This booking doesn't exist under your name. It's been canceled and transferred." I could almost hear Melissa's voice rising above the noise. "What do you mean canceled? That's impossible. We have tickets right here." The clerk repeated, calmer but unshaken. "Ma'am, this reservation was updated yesterday. The system shows a new guest list. It no longer includes you." Melissa's face went pale. She looked at David, then back at the clerk. Her voice cracked. "Who changed it?" The clerk answered without hesitation. "The booking owner, Helen Carter." I looked down at my lap, pressing my hands together to keep them steady. David's voice cut through the station, loud enough for people nearby to stop and stare. "Mom, what is this? What did you do?" His voice echoed desperate, angry, maybe even afraid. I didn't move. I didn't stand. I didn't walk over. I sat quietly in the other waiting area, the Harmony Sisters around me, their presence steadying me like anchors. Carol leaned in and whispered, "They're finding out." I nodded. On the other side, Melissa was frantic now, waving her arms, demanding to see a manager. David pulled out his phone, dialing furiously. My screen lit up almost instantly with his name. Call after call. I didn't answer. One of the kids, Emily, looked around nervously. She clutched her small backpack and scanned the crowd. And then her eyes landed on me. For a moment, she froze. Then her face softened with something between relief and sadness. She knew. I raised a hand slightly, just enough for her to see. She blinked back tears but said nothing. Melissa was too busy arguing to notice where Emily's gaze had gone. The loudspeaker announced boarding for our train. People began to move, dragging luggage, showing tickets. My group stood, gathering our things. The Harmony Sisters were quiet, respectful, as if they understood this moment was heavier than the bags we carried. As we walked toward the platform, the faint sound of a street performer's saxophone drifted in through the open doors, a lazy tune floating above the chaos. The notes felt like Frank himself was walking beside me, steady, unbothered by the storm behind us. I didn't look back at David or Melissa. I didn't need to. The scene was already burned into my memory, their confidence crumbling, their voices raised, their plans unraveling in public, and me, walking forward, not loudly, not angrily, just steadily, finally choosing myself. The train whistle blew long and low, signaling it was almost time to leave. Passengers hurried to their seats, dragging luggage, calling out to each other. The Harmony sisters and I found our carriage, set down our bags, and settled in. I sat by the window, my hands resting on my lap, trying to slow the pounding in my chest. Across the station, I could still hear David's voice faintly, raised in anger. My phone buzzed again and again on the table beside me, his name flashing on the screen. I turned it face down. And then I saw her. Emily, my granddaughter. She had slipped away from the group while Melissa was still arguing with the clerk. Her little backpack bounced against her shoulders as she ran, glancing back now and then like she didn't want to be caught. My heart clenched. I wanted to wave, to call her name, but I knew better. I stayed still, waiting. She darted past the conductor, holding up the small ticket pouch Melissa must have given her. Somehow, in all the chaos, she managed to make her way onto my carriage. Her eyes scanned the rows until they landed on me. "Grandma," she whispered, breathless, before rushing down the aisle. The moment she reached me, she dropped her bag and threw her arms around me. Her hug was so tight it almost knocked the breath out of me. I held her close, burying my face in her hair, which smelled faintly of the strawberry shampoo I'd once bought for her. "I don't care about the trip," she whispered into my shoulder. "I just want to hear you play music. That's all I wanted." My throat closed up. I cupped her face in my hands and looked straight into her eyes. "Emily, you are the best note I've ever played. The most beautiful music in my life." She smiled, tears gathering in the corners of her eyes. "Then don't stop playing, Grandma. Not for them." I kissed her forehead, unable to speak for a moment. My hands shook, but not from sadness this time. Something closer to gratitude. My phone buzzed again. David's name. Another call. Then another. I didn't answer. I pressed the side button and silenced it completely. The world outside could wait. Emily squeezed my hand. "They don't understand, Grandma, but I do. I promise, I do." I squeezed back. "That's enough for me, sweetheart. More than enough." The train lurched forward, wheels grinding against the tracks. People shifted in their seats. The Harmony sisters smiled knowingly, some pretending not to notice the reunion, but clearly moved by it. Carol dabbed her eyes with a tissue. I turned my gaze back out the window. The platform slipped away. The morning sun spilled across the tracks, casting a golden light that stretched ahead of us. For the first time in a long time, the direction felt right. I whispered softly, almost to myself, "New Orleans is waiting." And this time I wasn't afraid to meet it. When we finally reached New Orleans, I felt like I was stepping into a city made out of music. Even before we left the station, I could hear it. Horns, drums, laughter, voices calling out. It was like the whole place was alive, and every corner carried a rhythm of its own. That evening, we walked down Bourbon Street. The air was heavy with the smell of fried food and spices, mixed with the sweetness of powdered sugar from beignets. Neon signs flickered above crowded bars, casting colorful light on the cracked sidewalks. Street performers stood on corners, juggling fire or strumming guitars, their voices almost lost in the noise. The Harmony sisters walked close together, clutching their bags and looking around in awe. Carol whispered, "Helen, it's brighter than I imagined. I feel like I've stepped inside one of those postcards." Nora squeezed her arm and said, "It's more than that. It feels like the city itself is singing." Emily walked at my side, holding my hand tight. She had never seen anything like this either, and I could feel her excitement through her grip. As we turned down a side street, we spotted a young man with a saxophone standing beneath a lamppost. He played a slow tune, his case open in front of him with a few dollar bills scattered inside. The sound was smooth, deep, pulling people in like a magnet. He noticed us watching and gave a small nod, like he was inviting us to join. Something inside me stirred. For years, I told myself my music didn't matter anymore, that no one wanted to hear it. But standing there with my friends beside me and Emily looking up at me, I felt different. I looked at the sisters. "What do you think?" Carol laughed nervously. "Me? Sing out here on the street?" Beverly shook her head. "I haven't sung in public in years." Emily tugged at my arm. "Please, Grandma, play for me. Play for everyone." So I did. We borrowed a folding music stand from the sax player. I pulled out the small folder of hymns and choir songs I'd tucked into my bag, almost without thinking before we left. I sat at a beat-up keyboard someone had left nearby, chipped at the edges but still working. Emily sat beside me, her little hands ready to turn the pages. The Harmony sisters gathered around. Carol hummed the first note, steady and sure. Beverly followed, then Nora. Our voices rose together, shaky at first, but then strong, weaving into the saxophone's melody. At first, only a few people stopped. A couple on their way to dinner paused to listen. Then another group, and before long a crowd had gathered. Phones came out. Some clapped in time, others swayed. The saxophonist smiled, sliding into harmony with us like he'd been waiting for this moment. Emily leaned close and whispered, "Grandma, they love it." When we finished the first song, the street exploded with applause. People cheered, whistled, shouted for more. Someone yelled, "Encore!" And we couldn't help but laugh. For once, the laughter wasn't at us. It was with us. So we sang again. Louder this time. Freer. Each note felt like a piece of me coming back to life. By the time we stopped, the crowd was buzzing. Some had tears in their eyes. A woman pressed a 20 into the sax player's case and said, "This is what New Orleans is about." I didn't know it then, but one of those videos someone filmed was already making its way online. By morning, clips of 6 older women and a young girl singing on Bourbon Street had been shared thousands of times. People left comments like, "This is joy. This is what family really looks like." Meanwhile, Melissa had posted something too. A photo of her and David sitting in a bland hotel lobby somewhere else, her face tight with frustration. The caption read, "Plans ruined. Some people only think about themselves." But under her words, David had said nothing. Not one comment, not one defense. Just silence. And I didn't answer either. I didn't need to. Because that night, I was too busy living. When we finally walked back to the hotel, our voices hoarse from singing, Carol slipped her arm through mine. She whispered, "Helen, I haven't felt this alive in years. Thank you for seeing me." Nora added softly, "I thought my time for dreaming was over. Tonight you proved me wrong." I smiled, holding Emily's hand on the other side. My heart was full in a way I hadn't felt in decades. As we crossed back through the busy streets, I thought to myself, this is family, not blood, not obligation. Family is the people who see you, who choose you, who sing with you when the world tells you to stay quiet. For the first time in years, I felt completely at home. On our last night in New Orleans, I led everyone, Emily and the Harmony sisters, down to the Mississippi River. The streets behind us were still loud with jazz and laughter, but the riverbank was quiet, the kind of quiet that lets you breathe a little deeper. We carried a small box with us, filled with plain white candles. Nothing special, nothing expensive, just enough for each of us to hold a little light. We sat together on the stone steps near the water. The Mississippi flowed dark and steady, its surface catching bits of light from the city behind us. I could hear the faint hum of a saxophone drifting from a street corner. It felt like the city itself was giving us permission for what we were about to do. I spoke softly. "Tonight, let's remember those we've lost. And let's also remember ourselves, the parts we thought were invisible." Carol lit the first candle. Her hands shook, but her voice was strong. "This is for my husband. He never got to see me sing in public. Tonight I did. And I swear I felt him standing behind me." She wiped her cheek, but she smiled while she said it. Beverly lit hers next. "This one is for the years I thought I was nothing more than a shadow in my own house. Tonight I sang, and strangers clapped. I am not invisible. I am still here." Nora leaned forward, shielding her flame from the breeze. "This one is for the girl I used to be, the one who thought her dreams expired when she turned 60. She was wrong. I still have music left in me, and I'll sing until I can't anymore." Louise held her candle close to her chest. "This one is for all the women who gave until they had nothing left and thought no one noticed. Tonight I know someone sees me. We see each other." The circle of candles grew brighter, small lights against the dark river. Finally, Emily lit hers. She looked up at me with wide, determined eyes. "This is for my grandma, for the music she carries, for the way she never stopped loving even when people didn't see it. I'll remember tonight forever." She placed her small hand on my shoulder. "Grandma, I'll never forget this." My throat tightened, but I managed to whisper back, "Emily, you are the best part of my song. You are the note I'll carry with me always." When it was my turn, I lit the last candle. I thought of Frank, of the promise we never got to keep, of the family that had chosen to walk away, and of the family sitting with me now. My voice was low, but it carried. "It isn't blood that makes a family," I said. It's the people who hear the music in your heart and choose to stay. That's what family is. No one spoke for a while after that. We just sat, listening to the river move, watching our flames flicker against the night. The silence wasn't empty. It was full, like a deep breath we all needed. Somewhere behind us in the city, someone began to play a saxophone again. The notes floated across the water, weaving through our little circle of light. It was soft, steady, like a lullaby. I looked around at the faces beside me, lined with age, lit with hope, finally seen. Emily leaned against me, her candle glowing in her hand, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel forgotten. I felt whole. The camera of my memory pulled back then, slowly, like in a movie. Our small circle of candles, the dark river rolling on, the sound of the saxophone filling the night. And I thought to myself, this is family. Chosen, real, unbreakable.